If the Qing were willing to tolerate various sorts of subtle protests, like the paintings of Bada Shanren or the place like Peach Blossom Fan, they were not willing to tolerate outright challenges. And the greatest test for the Qing came in the 1670s. And it came from the man who had done more than anyone else to enable the Manchus to rise to power in the first place, namely Wu Sangui. Wu Sangui led the most dangerous challenge to Qing rule in what we know as the rebellion of the three feudatories, or the Sanfan, which lasted from 1673 until 1681, and which almost undid the Qing. At one point, they had conquered half the country themselves, the entire southern half of the country. It would be 2 centuries before a similarly serious uprising once again arose to threaten Qing control. That was the Taiping Rebellion. The defeat of Wu Sangui and the suppression of the Sanfan Rebellion meant the end of the last major threat posed by the Han Chinese to the stability of the Qing Empire, and really marked a kind of coming of age of the Qing. Now, I've already talked about the consolidation of the Qing. The fact is that large parts of the country were not actually conquered by Manchu armies. Central rule was extended into the far south by relying on Chinese, not Manchu forces. These were divided into 3 separate groups called feudatories: Wu Sangui in Yunnan and Guizhou, Shang Kexi in Guangdong, and Geng Jingzhong in Fujian province. Each of these was run like an independent fief. Together they received about 10 million taels of silver annually. That's about 1/3 of the total tax revenue that was funneled to them. They were able to appoint their own bureaucracy, which was staffed mostly by their own relatives and followers. They had their own large armies, which were bigger than those of the Qing. Wu's was especially large, and to make sure he didn't get too out of line, his eldest son was kept a hostage in Beijing. Now, this was clearly not a stable configuration, and as the time passed, it became clear that something was going to have to be done. In 1673, Shang Kexi asked to step down, but he wanted his son to take his place. The other 2 also offered their resignations, which the court, after some hesitation, accepted, much to their surprise. At this point, Wu Sangui announced that he was in rebellion. The forces of the 3 feudatories joined together, and they announced a proclamation that they were founding their own dynasty and they were bringing back all of the old Ming customs, including hairstyles. This rebellion, as I say, began in 1673. It resulted in the nearly complete loss of southwest China from Qing control. And it would not have been surprising, in fact, if the Manchus had returned north at this point and just given up on the whole thing. Indeed, part of the terms set forward by Wu Sangui was that the Manchus leave. Now, the Qing did not do this. They sent their own army, a combined Manchu-Chinese army, against the 3 feudatories, which at first were very unsuccessful. But the tide began to turn in 1676, first with the surrender of Geng, and then the next year the surrender of Shang. Wu Sangui himself died in 1678, and he was succeeded by his son, who held out for another 3 or 4 years in Kunming, and they were last defeated by the Qing in April of 1681. That was the end of the last major threat posed by the Chinese to the stability of the empire. It's important because it marks what some historians have noted is the transition from Ming loyalism to Qing loyalism. Many Chinese officials decided not to line up with Wu Sangui and his allies, even though they were all Han Chinese, but allied instead with the Manchus, with the Qing. So it's only at this point, some 40 years after the conquest of Beijing, that Qing rule began to take on the look of permanence, and Kangxi's sacred edict began to acquire the ring of authenticity.